History is supposed to flow like a river, carrying the memory of humanity forward, one event after another, one generation building on the last. And yet when we peer into the past, we find places where the current vanishes, where the riverbed is dry and the water of memory is gone. These are the silences of history, the so-called empty centuries, the times when records collapse, when civilizations vanish, when knowledge that should have endured is instead cut off cleanly, as if a blade had fallen across the fabric of time. Historians have always sought convenient explanations. A library burned, a city sacked, a plague that carried away both lives and the parchment that recorded them. But convenience does not equal truth. Chaos never cleans so neatly. Wars leave survivors. Plagues leave scattered writings. Fires leave fragments. Yet in these centuries, in Rome after the empire fell, in Southeast Asia where Funan once thrived, in Arabia at the dawn of Islam, we find not fragments but voids, and voids are suspicious. Consider Rome. For centuries it was not merely a state, but a machine of continuity. Its roads stretched across continents, its aqueducts carved valleys, its libraries hoarded scrolls of science and medicine. When Rome fell in 476, one might expect turbulence, but turbulence still preserves memory. Instead, within a century, literacy collapsed, sanitation crumbled, knowledge of engineering vanished. The very recipe for Rome's concrete, stronger than anything rediscovered until modern times, was forgotten. Europe stepped backward, and a child born in the year 500 had less access to knowledge than one born 800 years before in Athens. We call this the Dark Ages, but darkness is not absence, it is concealment, and concealment suggests an author. And then half a world away, in the wetlands of Southeast Asia, another silence. The Kingdom of Funan. A maritime empire from the 1st to the 6th century commanded trade routes, built vast canals, visible even from modern satellites, raised temples, and recorded its words in script. And then, nothing. By the 7th century, the cities were empty, the script forgotten. Emissaries from China who once described its splendor returned to find only silence. Not conquest, not destruction, simply dissolution. Historians mutter about climate change, shifting trade, disease, but such things scatter traces. They do not erase memory so completely. Funan left whispers, and whispers do not satisfy. And in Arabia, a man arose whose words reshaped the world. Muhammad's message spread across continents, toppled empires, founded a civilization that would rival Rome itself, and yet from his lifetime, almost no written records survive. No diaries, no transcripts, no detailed history. Only a century later do biographies appear, and sayings attributed to him are compiled generations after his death. Oral tradition, historians say, a culture of memory, but oral traditions still leave inscriptions, carvings, fragments, and here we find only void. Why does the 1st century of Islam mirror Rome's silence, mirror Funan's disappearance? 3 continents, 3 cultures, 3 voids, all clustered, all alike, and into those voids rushed myth. When records vanish, stories grow. Dragons scorched the skies in Europe, gods rode chariots of flame in the Americas, serpents of fire descended in Asia, beings wielded thunder as weapons in Africa. Historians wave them away as archetypes, imagination, shared human dreams. But what if they are not dreams? Imagine a farmer in 500 CE looking up to see a shape descending from the heavens. He has no words for ship or plasma or reactor. He calls it a dragon, a god, a throne of fire. And what do these gods do? They do not bless, they do not heal, they erase, they silence, they reset. If myths are memory, then every dragon, every thunderbolt, every god descending is not fantasy but testimony. Testimony of contact, of invasion, of correction. Taken separately, each silence can be excused. Rome fell to invaders. Funan to climate. Islam preserved memory orally. But taken together, across continents, across centuries, the pattern emerges. Knowledge surges, anomalies appear, civilizations leap forward, and then silence. Always silence. The cracks in history are not random, they cluster, they repeat, they suggest intent. And intent means the empty centuries are not empty at all. They are censored, they are edited, they are history rewritten. And so we must ask the question, what was humanity doing just before these silences fell? Because scattered across the ancient world are anomalies that do not fit, inventions too advanced, knowledge too precise, technologies that seem centuries ahead of their time. The Antikythera mechanism, a computer of bronze from 2,000 years ago, predicting eclipses with gears whose precision rivaled clocks not seen again until the Renaissance. The Peary race map, charting coastlines of South America and even Antarctica centuries before discovery, drawn from older sources now lost. Damascus steel, stronger than European blades until modern metallurgy, its recipe vanished. Iron pillars that resist rust for millennia. These are not myths, they are matter, evidence that human hands reached farther than they should have. And always, after such sparks, comes silence. Damascus steel forgotten. Roman concrete vanished. The computer of Antikythera unique and unmatched. Why does knowledge leap and then collapse? Why does the pattern always end with erasure? Unless each leap forward was noticed. Unless each spark drew attention from beyond. Because the universe listens. Always. And when Earth whispered, whether with radio we did not yet understand, or with the energy of lightning caught in stone, or with the alignment of monuments that pulsed with resonance, we sent signals. Signals saying we are here. And in the dark, something heard. And something heard. Perhaps not a benevolent listener, not a curious friend in the dark, but a warden, a custodian, a civilization far older than ours whose duty was not to guide, but to control. They had seen this before. Young species fumbling too close to fire, reaching too far into the machinery of the cosmos. In their memory, such sparks always ended in catastrophe, a child with matches setting the forest ablaze. To them, we were not dangerous yet, but the potential of danger was enough. A whisper was too much. A signal meant risk, and so they came. At first, the arrivals were subtle, a strange star where none should be, a light that moved against the heavens, shadows mistaken for clouds, thunder mistaken for machines. Ancient chroniclers spoke of wheels of fire, of thrones descending from the sky, of serpents of iron and angels in armor. They called them gods, demons, heavenly messengers. But gods do not erase libraries. Demons do not burn archives. Only conquerors, only custodians, only those with purpose beyond our comprehension would have done that. They descended not with fleets that scarred the earth, but with precision. They struck at memory. They silenced cities by removing knowledge. The scrolls, the tablets, the scripts, all vanished or destroyed. The priests who remembered the scribes who copied, the engineers who built, all erased, scattered, or rewritten. And in place of memory, they planted myths. They allowed just enough fragments to become legend, distorted, harmless, stripped of truth. Where once there had been records of contact, now there were only stories of dragons, of gods with thunderbolts, of heroes fighting celestial beasts. The intervention was hidden inside the imagination of humanity, so that no one would ever suspect what had really happened. But whispers endure. In the ruins of Rome's collapse, in the jungles where Funan dissolved, in the deserts where Islam was born, the same pattern emerges: a surge, a silence, a myth. Always myth. It was the perfect camouflage. To erase a people, you burn their bodies. To erase their memory, you burn their words. But to erase their truth, you replace it with legend, so that centuries later, scholars laugh at the idea, dismiss the testimony, and never see the invasion beneath the poetry. And still, traces survived. The Antikythera mechanism pulled from a shipwreck, a bronze gear computer no one could explain. The Piri race map hinting at lands charted long before any ship should have reached them. The iron pillar of Delhi, stainless for a millennium. Damascus blades with crystalline patterns lost to time. They are fossils of knowledge, artifacts of a humanity that had leapt forward and been forced backward. Each one whispers the same message: we were reaching too far. And someone cut us down. Imagine for a moment the terror of those who lived through it. A farmer standing in his field as a light splits the sky. A priest clutching scrolls as fire descends upon his temple. A king watching as his city empties, not by plague or famine, but by silence, by fear, by the systematic removal of everything that gave it meaning. To the people, it must have seemed like judgment, divine punishment for arrogance. To us, with the eyes of hindsight, it looks like a correction, a reset. And what is most haunting is that it worked. Humanity did not disappear. We endured. But we endured stripped of knowledge, stripped of tools, stripped of memory. We were forced back into the mud, compelled to rebuild from fragments, forbidden to remember the fire we had once touched. And so, history looks like a stumble, a regression, a strange collapse that scholars still argue over. Yet beneath their arguments lies the possibility of truth, that we were silenced not by accident, not by neglect, but by design. The more we examine the pattern, the clearer it becomes. Civilization surges, anomalies appear, knowledge leaps, and then silence. After silence, myth. After myth, rebirth, but always slower, always under watch. This cycle suggests an intelligence behind the curtain, an editor of our story, ensuring we do not move too quickly, ensuring we remain within boundaries invisible to us, but clear to them. And if this is true, then our progress today carries with it a warning, because once again we are sprinting. We split the atom, we scatter satellites into the sky, we speak to artificial minds, we beam radio and television into the cosmos. Once again, we are noisy. Once again, our signals say, we are here. Once again, we risk being heard. And if the custodians, the wardens, the silent editors of our history are still out there, listening, then our century may not be as secure as we believe. For the last time they came, they erased centuries, they reset civilizations, they buried memory under myth. The question is not whether they came, it is whether they will come again. And if they do, will we survive the silence a second time? They did not descend upon us with the fury of war in the beginning. They came as shadows, as watchers, silent shapes above our world, studying, measuring, deciding. And when the moment arrived, when their judgment was clear, they stepped out of shadow and into myth. Across the skies of Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas, the same stories surface. Chariots of fire, serpents of iron, wheels that burned with light. These were not hallucinations of farmers or shepherds. These were memories, memories so profound that they etched themselves into folklore across continents. But what the people of those centuries saw as gods, we must recognize for what they were: ships, craft of a kind we still cannot build today, descending into our atmosphere to enforce silence. What followed was not open conquest, but surgical correction. They did not seek to exterminate us. If they had wished, humanity would have ended in that age, snuffed out like a flame. No. Their purpose was subtler and more terrifying: to edit us, to rewrite our trajectory, to strike away what we had begun to build. Cities that had become too advanced too quickly suffered collapse. Records that hinted at technology beyond our station were destroyed. Leaders who might have carried humanity further were cut down or discredited. Knowledge itself was their target, and they succeeded. Imagine the terror of seeing knowledge slip away. An engineer who once knew how to forge an unbreakable blade dies, and no one can replicate his skill. A scholar who once mapped the skies with uncanny accuracy finds his scrolls burned, his apprentices scattered. A city that once glowed with the fires of innovation is left in ruin, its people told by trembling priests that the gods punished them for arrogance. To the people, it was divine wrath. To us, it is control. And yet, even as they cut us down, we resisted in the only way we could, by turning memory into story. The myths of heroes slaying dragons, of mortals wrestling gods, of lightning stolen from the sky. These are not fairy tales. They are encoded resistance, distorted memories of battles fought between human will and inhuman power. Perhaps the battles were hopeless. Perhaps every hero failed. But the fact that the stories survived at all means fragments of truth endured. We remembered enough to whisper that once, long ago, we stood against beings from the heavens, but resistance was crushed, and in time the invaders erased themselves from sight, leaving only silence behind. What they left us with was a world reset. Rome forgotten, Funan dissolved, Arabia's first century written over. Great gaps of time in which humanity stumbled, fumbled, rebuilt from ashes. And we, not knowing the editors above us, believed the lie that history itself had simply collapsed. The invaders did not need to conquer us forever. They only needed to delay us, to push us back centuries, to buy themselves time. And so came the empty centuries. Time not truly empty, but emptied, scrubbed clean like a slate, wiped of chalk. The people lived, they worked, they prayed, but their memory of what had come before was severed. Their children grew up in ignorance, never knowing their ancestors had touched fire stolen from the stars, and so we became harmless again as we were meant to be. Yet even in their thoroughness, they made mistakes. A mechanism left behind in a sunken ship, a map too accurate for its age, a blade forged with forgotten metallurgy, an iron pillar that would not rust. Each fragment is a breadcrumb, a trace of the path we had once taken. To us, they are anomalies, curiosities for scholars to argue about, but together they form a trail, a hidden reminder that humanity once reached further and was dragged back. Now, consider the implication. If they came once, they may come again. For today, we are noisy once more. We beam radio into the stars. We ignite reactors, split atoms, create machines that think. We leave footprints on the moon, signals on Mars, whispers carried by probes into interstellar space. We are sprinting, louder and brighter than ever. And somewhere in the dark, the custodians may be listening again, wondering if the time has come to reset us once more. The silence in history was not natural, it was imposed. And the most dangerous truth is this: silences can return. They came not to announce themselves, not to demand allegiance, but to remove what they feared. And for a brief and terrible span of time, humanity resisted. Across continents in whispers now forgotten, there are shards of battles that make no sense as legend, but make perfect sense as memory. Heroes who slew dragons, gods who descended and were fought by mortals, angels cast down in wars of heaven. Each is a fragment of the same event, a war waged between humanity and something from the sky. Imagine the chaos of it. A city illuminated by a great craft above, light spilling down as if the stars themselves had fallen. Soldiers with iron swords charging against beams of fire they could not comprehend. Priests lifting relics in desperate prayers while the sky cracked open with thunder, not of storms but of machines. To the witnesses, it was apocalypse, divine wrath, the end of days. To us, reading between the lines, it was first contact and conquest. The war was not fought on equal ground. They possessed weapons that bent light, that silenced sound, that burned stone itself to ash. But humanity possessed something they had not anticipated: refusal. Again and again in the stories, mortals rise to strike back. Gilgamesh facing heavenly bulls, Thor battling serpents that encircle the world, heroes of Mesoamerica confronting gods in fiery trials. These are distorted, yes, but what if their seed was truth? What if ordinary men and women, facing annihilation, chose to fight anyway, leaving behind stories that became myth? But resistance was doomed. Every battle ends in defeat, though the stories hide it in allegory. The dragon slain only after it has destroyed kingdoms. The god defeated, but only in dreams. The serpent cut down, but only after poisoning the land. In reality, humanity struck back, but each blow was swallowed, each victory hollow. And when the war ended, it ended not with our triumph, but with our silence. The conquerors erased themselves from our memory, left behind only myth, and removed from us the tools with which we might rise again too quickly. The cost was not just blood, but knowledge. Scrolls burned, languages lost, entire sciences ripped from our grasp. The custodians knew that killing our bodies would not be enough. To ensure control, they had to kill our memory. And so they reached into every cradle of civilization, struck down the archives, shattered the continuity. That is why the centuries are empty. That is why Rome's knowledge was lost, why Funan dissolved, why Islam's earliest century is so thin. These were not natural accidents. These were surgical strikes. Imagine the aftermath. Survivors stumbling among ruins, clutching fragments of tools they no longer understood. children asking what the fire in the sky had been, and parents answering in trembling voices that it was a god's punishment. Knowledge twisted into religion, trauma reshaped into legend, and truth buried under the soil of myth. It was the perfect camouflage, for who would ever believe that an invasion had taken place if the only records left described gods and monsters? Scholars would dismiss them as fairy tales, as they do today. The conquerors wrote their silence into us, and we became complicit in forgetting. Yet, in the deep fabric of our cultures, hints remained. The myths are not just stories. They are encoded testimony. And when we place them side by side, from Europe to Asia, to Africa, to the Americas, the pattern is undeniable. The same beings, the same fire, the same judgment, described with different names. 4 continents whispering the same memory. This cannot be coincidence. This is testimony scattered deliberately, testimony hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to connect. And now, as we rise again, the question hangs above us like a blade. Will the silence come again? The last time, they cut centuries from our memory. The last time, they reset us, slowed us, forced us to crawl. Today, we sprint once more. Satellites orbit our planet. Machines think. Probes wander between stars. We send out messages, sometimes deliberate, sometimes accidental, but always loud. If they hear us again, what will they decide? Will they descend once more to burn our memory and reset our course? Or will they see something different in us this time? Something that makes us worth leaving intact? When the war ended, humanity was not annihilated but corrected, not destroyed but rewritten. The custodians did not wish for our extinction. Extinction is noisy. Extinction leaves scars that echo in the galaxy. No, they wanted silence. They wanted to reset the experiment, to push us back just far enough that we would pose no threat, that we would take centuries, even millennia to recover. And so the reset began. Knowledge was excised like a tumor. Libraries burned not once but across continents. Archives dissolved into ash. Scribes slaughtered. Artisans scattered. Builders forgotten. What remained was not progress, but fragments. Broken pieces of a puzzle no one could reassemble. A recipe for concrete here. A half-remembered formula for steel there. A shard of astronomy preserved in a temple, but never the whole. Civilization was shattered deliberately, cut into shards too small to threaten the order they imposed. The people who survived made sense of the trauma the only way they could. They clothed it in religion, wrapped it in story. The gods had punished arrogance, they said. The fire in the sky was divine judgment. The fall of cities was the wrath of heaven. It was safer to believe that the destruction was spiritual than to remember it as conquest. For to remember the truth was to risk drawing the gaze again. And so whole generations were born into ignorance, their ancestors' brilliance hidden behind the veil of myth. They lived in the shadows of ruins they could not explain, walked past pillars they could not replicate, and prayed beneath stars that once had burned them. But memory is stubborn. Even erased, it leaks back through cracks. The great myths of humanity are testimony disguised as fable. The flood, retold in Mesopotamia, in India, in Mesoamerica, was not just a natural disaster, but perhaps the cleansing fire of invasion. Remembered as water to mask its truth. The wars of gods in Norse sagas, the battles of devas and asuras in Hindu epics, the struggles of sky beings in African tales, all echo the same event: resistance crushed and memory broken. Each culture kept a shard, each shard distorted but not lost, and together they form a mosaic too consistent to ignore. Archaeology, too, whispers of the reset. A bronze computer pulled from a shipwreck, gears meshing in ways we thought impossible for its age. A map showing coastlines no human could have known. An iron pillar that should have rusted to nothing long ago, standing tall and clean. Swords that cut so sharp they seemed forged by magic, their secrets lost for centuries. These are the fossils of a world cut down before its time, relics of a civilization forced back into ignorance. Scholars debate them, label them anomalies, curiosities, out-of-place artifacts, but they are more than curiosities. They are evidence. Fingerprints left behind by a species reaching too far, and a hand descending to push it back. And what is most haunting is that we accepted it. We rebuilt slowly, painfully, generation by generation, never questioning why the ruins of the past seemed older than they should, never wondering why knowledge came and went like tides. We became convinced that progress was slow, that civilization was fragile, that the climb from mud to stars was long and uncertain. But what if it is not? What if the climb is fast, natural, inevitable, and what slows us is not ourselves, but the corrections imposed upon us? The reset worked. For centuries we crawled. For centuries we forgot. But humanity is stubborn. The fragments we preserved, the myths we told, the relics we hid, all of them became seeds. Seeds that sprouted again in the Renaissance, in the age of exploration, in the scientific revolution. Each leap forward was not new, but a remembering, a rediscovery of what had once been taken. And with each rediscovery, the risk grew. For every invention is a signal, every experiment a whisper into the void. The last time we whispered, they came. The last time we reached too far, they silenced us. And today, once again, we are loud. And yet, despite all their precision, despite all the care with which they burned our libraries and silenced our tongues, they could not erase everything. Fragments slipped through the cracks of their design, small and scattered but undeniable, waiting for centuries to be unearthed by our hands. We call them anomalies. We call them curiosities. But they are more than that. They are scars. They are fingerprints. They are the evidence of what was done to us, the proof that our past is not as simple as we are told. Take, for example, the great statues on Easter Island, the Moai, staring inland with their impassive eyes. To us, they are the remains of a Polynesian culture that thrived and collapsed. But look closer and you see more. The size, the scale, the precision of the stonework, far beyond what the fragile tools of that era should have achieved. Why build such giants unless to remember giants, to fix in stone the memory of beings who once walked among them? The islanders say the statues represent their ancestors, but myths whisper of strangers from the sky, of beings with power beyond human. Perhaps the Moai are not merely ancestors, but warnings, effigies of the ones who came, left, and promised to return. Or look to the pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica, so similar in shape though oceans apart. Historians shrug and speak of coincidence, of convergent design, but pyramids are not merely tombs or temples. They are machines of alignment, placed precisely to mirror the stars above. What purpose did they serve? To honor the heavens? To measure time? Or to signal outward, to resonate with the cosmos, to send a message we did not even understand we were sending? And if that is true, then perhaps their construction was not merely devotion, but collaboration, humanity guided to build what would betray its existence to the wardens above. Then there are the maps, the impossible charts of coastlines no human should have known. The Piri Reis map, yes, but also others, fragments hinting at a cartography that predates our accepted history. Coastlines drawn with the accuracy of satellites, continents charted as though from the sky. Did we once fly? Did we once see our world from above before the reset came crashing down? Or were those maps gifts, remnants of knowledge stolen back from the invaders, preserved long enough to be copied and recopied until the fragments survived into later centuries? And what of the metals that defy explanation? The Pillar of Delhi, forged with purity so great, it resists rust for over 1,000 years, standing tall against monsoon and sun. Damascus steel, patterned like flowing water, blades that could cut through armor, their secret lost for centuries, until rediscovered only with the tools of modern science. Strange alloys found in South America, smelted with techniques no one can reconstruct. These are not mistakes. These are survivals, relics of a knowledge that should not have existed in those times, knowledge that was meant to be erased, but endured in the hands of stubborn artisans who refused to forget. Even in our myths, evidence remains. The flood stories told across the world, in Sumeria, in India, in the Americas, always the same tale. The world cleansed, civilization reset, survivors carrying fragments of memory into a new age. Scholars say these are echoes of natural floods, of rivers overflowing, seas rising. But why the same structure, the same arc, the same insistence that humanity had grown arrogant and was punished from above? They are not just stories of water. They are allegories of fire from the sky, of judgment descending, of resets imposed. The waters cover the world because the truth of flame was too dangerous to speak. We dig into the earth and we find things that should not be there. Carvings too precise, stones cut so cleanly they fit without mortar, machines buried in strata older than our history, artifacts we dismiss as hoaxes because the alternative is unthinkable. But the alternative stares us in the face, that humanity has been here before, that we have risen and been cut down, that our story is not a climb from mud to stars, but a cycle of ascent and erasure, ascent and silence repeated whenever we grow too loud. And every time, fragments slip through. Every time, we leave behind evidence we were not supposed to. Every time, the truth resists forgetting. And so the ground beneath us whispers. The stones whisper. The myths whisper. Together, they form a chorus, faint but growing louder, reminding us of what we lost, reminding us of what was taken, reminding us that the silence was not ours, but imposed. And if we listen carefully, if we put the fragments together, the pattern becomes undeniable. We were visited. We were judged. We were reset. And the traces of that reset lie scattered across the earth, waiting for us to see them not as curiosities, but as testimony. And yet, even stripped bare, even forced back into the dust, humanity did not vanish. That is the part of the story the custodians may never have understood, or perhaps underestimated. That survival is not only measured in weapons or machines, but in persistence. We endured. We crawled out of the ruins, carrying nothing but fragments and stories, and we built again. The cities were smaller, the tools cruder, the scripts simpler, but the fire was still there, hidden under ash. Every field tilled, every stone lifted, every child taught a prayer that remembered more than it admitted. These were acts of defiance. Even when the knowledge was gone, the will to reclaim it never died. Civilizations rose once more from the silence. In Europe, after centuries of darkness, monasteries became vaults of memory, copying what few texts remained, preserving seeds of thought that would sprout again. In Asia, empires rose in the wake of Funan's disappearance, new scripts, new temples, new canals, as though the instinct to build could never be erased entirely. In the Middle East, though the earliest century of Islam was thin, the centuries that followed became an explosion of learning. Baghdad shining with libraries, Damascus with scholars, Cairo with astronomers, as if the silence had only compressed the spring, and once released it burst outward. Across the world we rebuilt, slower perhaps, weaker perhaps, but never still. This is the truth that myths conceal. The heroes may have lost their battles against gods and dragons, but humanity as a whole never surrendered. We lost knowledge, but we did not lose the hunger for it. We lost tools, but not the hands that would shape them again. We lost memory, but not imagination, and imagination itself is a form of survival. Every story told to a child kept alive the echo of what we had once known, and though the stories were twisted, though they were wrapped in legend, they carried within them a seed. That seed waited, and in time it grew. The custodians may have believed that centuries of silence would be enough, that by pushing us back, they had bought themselves safety for an age. But silence is only ever temporary. A people that can endure invasion, erasure, famine, and collapse is a people that cannot be permanently suppressed. We stumbled forward, rediscovering fire we once held, reinventing wheels we once rolled, rebuilding towers we once raised. And each time we did it faster. The climb back was slow at first, but it accelerated, as though something deep in our blood remembered, as though humanity itself carried memory not only in books, but in bone. That is what makes us dangerous and what makes us beautiful. We do not vanish, we return. Even if our libraries are burned, even if our tongues are silenced, even if our gods are rewritten into myths, we find the path again. The reset delayed us, but it did not destroy us. And perhaps that was their greatest mistake, believing that by editing our story, they could change its ending. But the ending is not theirs to write, it is ours. And now, as we rise once again, as we split the atom, sail beyond the planet, speak to machines that answer back, we carry with us not only the triumph of progress, but the memory of loss. Somewhere deep in us, in the marrow of our myths, in the bones of our legends, is the whisper that once we were silenced, and that silence may come again. But this time, we may be ready. This time, we may not accept erasure. This time, if they come, they may find not a species to reset, but a species that remembers even what was taken. And now, in our own age, the fragments are surfacing faster than ever. We dig into the earth and unearth stones cut so precisely they fit together without mortar, so tightly that not even a blade of grass can slide between them. And we ask, how could primitive hands have shaped them? How could bronze chisels have carved granite with such perfection? And we call it mystery, we call it ingenuity. But deep down we know we are seeing fingerprints of a knowledge we were not meant to keep. We pull artifacts from the ground that seem to laugh at our timelines, batteries from Mesopotamia, carvings of flying machines in Egyptian temples, sculptures that resemble astronauts in helmets, maps showing Antarctica as it looked without ice, and each time the official voices rush to say coincidence, hoax, misinterpretation, but each time the questions grow louder, and each time the pattern becomes clearer. Even science itself begins to whisper rebellion. We split the atom and discover energies that echo myths of thunderbolts hurled by gods. We send machines to Mars and realize that for millennia we have dreamed of red deserts where warriors once fought. We decode DNA and find stories of tinkering, as if the genome itself bears scars of editing long before we thought possible. Everywhere we look, what we find does not suggest a straight line of progress, but interruptions, resets, wounds in the story of our ascent. And the deeper we dig, the more it seems that we are recovering, not inventing, rediscovering, not creating, remembering, not imagining. The archaeologists, the historians, the skeptics, they all argue among themselves. Some cling to the comfort of chance, of independent genius scattered through history. Others dare to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the myths were true, that the gods were not gods, but something else, that the resets were not accidents, but interventions, that the silence has an author. And if that is so, then our present becomes a dangerous moment, because never before have we been this loud. Our satellites sing constantly. Our probes carry messages beyond the solar system. Our particle accelerators crash matter together with energies unthinkable a century ago. We are visible, we are audible, we are undeniable. And in our own time, we rise faster than ever. What once took millennia now takes decades. We leap from wood to steel to silicon, from sails to rockets, from campfire tales to global networks of thought. We are louder now than we have ever been. Louder than radio, louder than nuclear fire, louder than the probes that sail beyond Pluto. We speak with the voice of billions, every second sending signals into the dark. We are undeniable. And if they are listening, then they must know this: the humanity they silenced is not the humanity of today. We remember enough to resist. We remember enough to refuse. Perhaps they will come again. Perhaps even now, their ships wait at the edges of our perception, shadows in the outer planets, listening, measuring, deciding. But this time, when they descend, they will not find scattered farmers, mistaking them for gods. They will not find scribes whose scrolls can be burned, or artisans whose secrets can be silenced. They will find a species that has walked on its own moon, that has split the atom, that has seeded machines across the solar system. They will find a species that has already stared into the abyss of extinction and refused to step in. They will find a species that carries silence in its bones and has chosen to speak anyway. This is the moment where the myths shift. No longer are we the mortals begging gods for mercy. no longer the heroes destined to lose against dragons. This time, if the dragons return, we may be the fire that burns them. If the gods descend with their thrones of thunder, they may find their thunder answered. The silence that once fell over humanity may rise again as an attempt, but it will meet a wall of voices, billions, strong, defiant, unyielding. The story that was edited before will not be so easily edited now, and perhaps that is why the fragments survived. Perhaps that is why the anomalies endured. Perhaps the scattered gears, the uncorroded pillars, the impossible maps, the indestructible swords, they are not only evidence, but prophecy. Reminders left for us by ourselves, saying, "You were silenced once, but you will not be silenced forever." Perhaps even the myths, even the stories of gods and dragons, were not warnings of punishment, but promises of resistance, telling us that when the time came again, we would stand not as children to be corrected, but as equals demanding to be heard. So the question that haunts us now is not whether they came, for the silences prove it, the myths prove it, the ruins prove it. The question is whether they will come again. We have reached once more into the fire. We have split the atom, awakened suns in our deserts. We have carved information into silicon and given it thought. We have hurled machines into the void, carrying our voices far beyond the cradle of earth. We have begun to bend life itself with the tools of gene and code. We are sprinting louder than ever before, and the universe does not tolerate noise forever. Somewhere in the dark, something may already be listening. Somewhere, the custodians may be weighing us again as they did before, deciding if the time has come to silence us once more. But there is a difference now. The last time they came, we were scattered tribes and fragile kingdoms, farmers who mistook ships for gods, scribes whose records could be burned, artisans whose secrets could vanish with a single death. Today, we are billions, connected, resilient, armed with memory not only in parchment, but in stone, in code, in networks that span the planet. Today, to silence us would require more than fire. It would require extinguishing a species that has learned to resist extinction itself. And perhaps that is the true meaning of the fragments, the anomalies, the myths. They are not only evidence of our erasure, but reminders that we endured it, that even in silence we survived, that even stripped of our memory we rebuilt, that even judged and reset we returned. The custodians may be powerful, but they cannot erase the will that drives us forward. They cannot erase the spark that makes us human. They cannot erase the voice that refuses to be quiet. So if they come again, let them come. Let them weigh us once more. Let them find not children begging for mercy, but a species that has faced its own annihilation and refused. Let them find not myths to be rewritten, but voices that speak their own story. Let them find not silence, but a chorus, billion strong, defiant, unyielding. And if they do not come, if the silence never falls again, then still the warning remains. The empty centuries remind us that our history is not guaranteed, that our memory is fragile, that the voices of the past can be taken. But they also remind us that even when memory is cut away, the will to endure remains. That is who we are. That is what we carry. That is why we are dangerous. The silence was their weapon. Survival is ours, and survival speaks louder than silence. Survival speaks across centuries, across resets, across myths. Survival speaks in every stone we cut, in every story we tell, in every signal we send into the stars. Survival says, we were here, we are here, we will always be here. So remember the empty centuries. Remember the silence, not as a void, but as a scar. A scar that proves we lived, that proves we resisted, that proves we endured. And let that scar remind you of the truth, that no matter who comes, no matter how powerful, no matter how many times they try to erase us, humanity will always rise again. The river of history was broken, yes, but rivers find new paths, they carve new channels, they return to the sea, and so will we.